Welcome, everyone. Recently, locumtenants.com published The Heart Behind the Hire, a report that surveyed hundreds of in-house recruiters. The data validated what many of us already feel. 87% of us are deeply called to this work. We're mission-driven. But that passion has a cost. The report also showed that 64% feel they lack necessary leadership support and 42% lack clarity on organizational culture, which leads to burnout. We aren't here today to dwell on the problem. We're here to fix it. I'm joined by Andrea and Julie from Dartmouth Health to discuss how we move from feeling unsupported to advocating for what we need and turning that purpose into sustainable power. Let's start with that 64% gap. It's a huge number. Andrea, as a leader, why do you think so many recruiters feel isolated right now? Is it that leadership doesn't care, or that we need better tools to communicate our needs?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that 64% number really stops me in my tracks. But I don't actually believe it's because leadership doesn't care. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And recruiters sit at a really unique intersection. We're expected to be deeply mission driven and emotionally invested in our candidates. And then we're really focused on outcomes. And often those are all happening at the same time. And because we're really good at figuring it all out and pushing through, sometimes leadership just mistakenly assumes that we're fine. And so that silence can get misread as sustainability. And so there's that language gap where recruiters often talk about burnout in human terms, like emotional fatigue or misalignment, or maybe a lack of clarity. But leaders are listening for data and risk and impact. So we're just talking different languages. And so we don't always translate our needs into outcomes that leaders can act on. And then that support can sometimes unintentionally stall. So it's really not about blame, it's about alignment. So we need better tools, more confidence to advocate, and not just for ourselves, but for the work. So when recruiters can really clearly articulate what that support looks like and why it matters and how it advances the mission, that purpose becomes power instead of pressure. And so I think the opportunity here is huge because when mission-driven people feel supported, they don't just avoid burnout, then they become really a multiplier for the organization. And that's something that Julie and I both really believe in when we support our team and helping them navigate that.
I want to give our listeners a tool for this. If a recruiter listening right now feels overwhelmed, what's a specific script or approach they can use to walk into their boss's office and advocate for help without sounding like they're just complaining?
Oh, I love this question. So one of the most effective tools that we use as leaders is a structured check-in, and that can happen quarterly or even monthly, and it really changes the tone of the conversation. So instead of walking into your manager or your leader's office and saying, I'm overwhelmed, we ask our recruiters to come prepared with reflection. And so we provide check-in prompts, and that helps them to articulate four different things: what they've accomplished, what's been challenging, where they want to grow or develop, and then what support or obstacles that they need removed. And that does two really important things. First, it helps the recruiter to own their own development and then to manage up. And then it gives me as a leader really clear visibility into where can I step in and remove barriers, but then where can I recognize wins that might go otherwise unseen? So here's the script that I would give someone listening today. If you're a recruiter struggling, this is where you start taking notes. I'd love to use our next check-in to walk you through what's going really well, but also where I'm feeling stretched and what support you could help me to be more effective. Because my goal isn't to complain, it's to keep delivering at a high level in a sustainable way. So that right there, that framing is powerful because it's grounded in outcomes, not just in emotion. So over time, this tool becomes more than just a form that we ask our team to fill out. It becomes a journal of your progress. So quarter after quarter or month after month, you can see that growth, the patterns, the reoccurring obstacles, and your wins. But it creates that continuity, that psychological safety, and shared accountability between you as a recruiter and your leader. And so for us as leaders, it's a gift because it tells us exactly where we need to coach, where we need to advocate upward with senior leadership in the C-suite. But then where do we pause and we say, wow, you're doing more than you realize, and it really matters. So this is how we turn purpose into sustainable power. We give our recruiters a voice that's structured, it's credible, but it's impossible to ignore because you're not just talking about burnout, you're modeling what healthy advocacy looks like.
Support doesn't always have to come from the top, though. Julie, I know Dartmouth uses a buddy system to build resilience. Can you explain how that works practically to reduce the day-to-day pressure?
Yes, absolutely. So at Dartmouth Health, one of the most important things I think we've implemented is the recruiter buddy system, and it's intentionally peer driven. Each recruiter is paired with another recruiter, and the goal is to create that safe space to talk through challenging stakeholders or candidate strategies before things escalate or are feeling overwhelming. It reduces the day-to-day pressure because the recruiters don't feel like they're carrying these complex searches alone. They can say, hey, can I talk this through with you for 5 minutes instead of letting that pile up or waiting for a leadership intervention or just sitting on it for too long, right? And it also builds resilience because they're learning from each other in real time, sharing language that works, approaches that don't, and reminding each other that the challenges that they're facing in recruitment are often systemic and not personal. And that peer validation goes a long way in preventing burnout and making them feel less isolated in this industry.
The report also showed that 42% of recruiters lack clarity on culture, which often forces them into an order taker role rather than a strategic partner. Julie, does that lack of clarity make the job harder, and does that hurt the search?
Incredibly so, it does. Without it, recruiters default into order taking instead of strategic advising. It slows the search times, creating misaligned candidates and increasing the risk of declined offers or early turnover. Recruiters, we find they end up spending more time recalibrating after interviews because the feedback is vague or the priorities are shifting, and it weakens the candidate alignment. And the culture clarity will allow recruiters to drive alignment and not just fill roles. When your culture is clear, the recruiters can operate as true strategic partners and setting the expectations with candidates and even pushing back on the stakeholders if they're going down a direction that isn't going to be realistic in the market that we're trying to attract. And so, with a clearer culture, it leads to a stronger candidate slate, a better candidate experience, and hires who actually stick. It turns that work from transactional into workforce strategy, really.
Let's flip that dynamic. Andrea, you use an employer value proposition model at Dartmouth to gain authority. What is one power question a recruiter should ask in an intake meeting to instantly command respect and get the clarity they need?
Yeah, when we talk about using an employer value proposition model, what we're really talking about is shifting the conversation from what do you need filled to what promise are we actually making to a potential new hire. So, a powerful question that a recruiter can ask in an intake meeting is, when this role is filled a year from now, what would make you say this hire was absolutely worth it? And what would make them say the same about us? We tend to think about recruitment as, we're interviewing them, but they're really interviewing us. And when you think about EVP, we really have to help our stakeholders understand and define that. But when you ask that question, it instantly does a few things. First, it forces clarity because leaders have to articulate what that success is and not just the tasks that they're asking the recruiter to do. And it really surfaces what the real EVP is: growth, stability, leadership style, flexibility, purpose, not just compensation. And then it positions that recruiter to be a partner who really cares about retention and long-term success, not just how quickly can I fill this role. It also signals credibility because you're not just sourcing talent, you're really protecting the organization's reputation and you're aligning expectations on both sides. So when recruiters anchor those intake conversations and outcomes and experience in mutual value, then that respect is going to flow naturally because authority doesn't come from pushing back, it comes from asking better questions. So if we want to reduce burnout and mishires, we have to start by being clear about the promise we're asking somebody to believe in. And many of our stakeholders really need help defining EVP, and a recruiter can gain control by helping them to build that understanding and then articulating it clearly throughout the entire recruitment process.
From my seat at LT, I often see organizations wait until they're drowning to call us. But I view locums as a relief valve, a way to buy your permanent team breathing room so they don't burn out during a hard search. Andrea, how does utilizing locums as part of your retention strategy support your internal team?
I completely agree with that framing. Locums are not a failure signature, they are a relief valve. And from a retention standpoint, I think locums do three critical things for our internal team. First, they really do protect our people because when a search is complex or the market is tight, which we know every specialty is in that situation, the worst thing we can do is ask our permanent providers and our recruiters to carry an unsustainable load. Strategic use of locums buys us time, and time is really what preserves morale and quality and patient safety. And second, locums create space for better decisions because when your team is not in a crisis mode, recruiters can run a thoughtful search instead of a rushed one. And that leads to better matches, a stronger cultural alignment, and higher retention on the back end. And third, and I think this is really often overlooked, it just sends a powerful message internally. We're willing to invest in order to prevent burnout. And that's what builds trust. Providers feel seen, recruiters feel supported, and leaders stop normalizing urgency as a permanent operating model. So we're really intentional about how we use locums. It's not about replacing permanent recruitment. It's really just about stabilizing the system long enough for permanent solutions to take root. So retention isn't just about who we hire. It's really about how do we care for the people that are carrying that load while we search.
We can't always control the system, but we can control our habits. To close us out, what is one small, non-negotiable daily habit you practice, whether it's calendar blocking or how you start your day, that protects your energy?
I really think that those boundaries protect your energy. And it's something that's super important to me. And it helps me come back every single day, recharged, refueled, and ready to serve my community, my team, and Dartmouth in whole. So one of my most important non-negotiables is honoring the boundaries around my time and energy. So practically what that looks like is I'm intentional about when I'm available for reactive work and when I'm not. So whether I do block time on my calendar to think, prepare, and just get organized, but also I protect and think through when something comes up, is it truly urgent? Recruitment is a field where everything can feel urgent, but not everything is urgent. So identifying what's urgent, what's not, and deciding what I'm reacting to is a way of boundary setting for me. And it also shows that I'm setting healthy habits for my team. And when leaders don't set boundaries, it quietly gives permission for burnout to become the norm with those who report into me. So by being clear about my boundaries, I'm actually more present, more responsive when it matters, and better able to support my team. And Andrea and I find that when we don't immediately respond to our recruiters in solving their question, they end up solving it for themselves, which boosts their confidence and allows them to be better recruiters in the long run versus just being like, oh, I need my leadership to dive in and do it. So it's really a gift that helps a lot of people by setting the true example.
For me,
Andrea?
my non-negotiable is really how I start my day. So like before all the noise begins, I take a few quiet minutes to just reconnect with my values and my North Star, which is my faith. It grounds me, it sets my intention, and it helps me to just lead with clarity and with grace, especially on hard days. So when I protect that space, my energy just stays aligned with my purpose instead of getting pulled in every direction. So that's one of my non-negotiables, and it has really helped frame who I am as a leader, but also as a person.
Thank you both. For everyone listening, you don't have to build these tools from scratch. We've compiled the strategies discussed today into our Recruiter Career Advocacy Toolkit. You can download it below to start advocating for yourself today.